It all starts with a spark, like this thought or this vision in your head that gives you these ideas and these visions of who you want to be. And I can remember myself sitting in my room, writing in my journal about stories and characters of people I had no idea who they were. And I just knew that that's who I was going to be. I was going to write books, I was going to move to Atlanta, and I was going to become this big time authoress. And I did that. I got the awards. I got the bestsellers list. I met some phenomenal people, and I've helped other people dream out loud. I think that when it comes down to dreaming, it's more than about just getting it done. It's about having fun and enjoying life while you do it. So y'all dream out loud with me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to AAMBC, The Ink. We are here today, per usual, with our author conversations where we speak and we ask questions from fellow authors and writers just to gain more insight about their projects as well as introduce you guys to their work. Thank you so much for joining us again. We are waiting for our guest tonight, which is going to be, really amazing. We're going to have an awesome conversation. Typically, we have fiction authors who talk about stories that they created from scratch and, things that inspired them. However, tonight, we will be talking to an author of a nonfiction book. So this should be really exciting. We're lucky to have him. His name is Kelvin Lassiter. And thank you, Kelvin, for joining us tonight. One moment
We
here,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Thank you. Welcome. Can you see
Thank
us
you.
well, Kelvin?
I can see you great. Can hear you
Okay,
loud and
great.
clear.
Great. Awesome and amazing. Thank you. Before we dive into questions, because of course I have many,
Sure.
I would like to have you just briefly introduce yourself to our guests and our viewers and tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got into authoring and writing.
Well, thanks for that. I truly appreciate it. Um, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So, uh, was born into a military family in West Philadelphia, and we traveled across the country quite a bit, from East Coast to West Coast, and back to the East Coast within 7 years. And most of my childhood was spent in Washington, D.C. That's where I'm broadcasting from right now. Things in life. My father was in the Vietnam War, and when he came back, things just weren't the same in the family, and we were or could be classified as what's called dysfunctional. And I'm sure some of us may have been through that ourselves, and we weren't no different. But my parents still decided to buy a house in the suburbs of DC, and uh, did not settle their communications issues. So within a span of a year, uh, grandmother died, sister was born, and my mother developed breast cancer. Changed the whole dynamic of our
Wow.
family. And again, because the communications issues are resolved, a few years into that, my parents ended up having the house being foreclosed on, and we
Mm,
became homeless. This all happened my junior and senior year in high school. And after that, because of the issues that were going on in my family, uh, didn't do too well. My mother eventually ended up passing away from cancer in my arms, and
mhm.
uh, I eventually ended up on the street. And I always had a passion for working, uh, passion for working, and then I decided, well, I need to tell my story, and I want to be able to help people because I know I'm not the only one that had these struggles. And I always thought, or sometimes I thought it would take money to help people,
Mhm.
but that wasn't the case with me. I just didn't acquire a lot of money. So I said, well, writing would be a avenue in speaking. So that's how I got into writing, and I wrote a self-help book, excuse me, a quotation book called "The Storm Is Over for Now: Quotations for Achievement." And this is my second publication, "Surviving the Storm."
Okay.
The poor will be with you in America, and it's a series of incidents that happen with people who had struggles in their life and are now doing well in their life, and that's what brings us here today.
I love that. That concept is so amazing. I definitely commend you on just navigating that space and finding your purpose through literature, and all of that. So that's great. And so just to rewind just a little bit with how you came into realizing that your story had power, which really taps into nonfiction stories. Um, Nonfiction stories have a lot of purpose because people find a lot of relatability. Not that they don't in fiction books, because fiction books obviously are very relatable as well, most times.
Sure.
However, true stories have a different effect because you're actually connecting with the person whose story it is. So tell us a little bit about, because I see you gradually went from, starting with your quotation book, and now you have like a full-fledged literature book. So I can see those steps in you realizing, the power of that story and just how to leverage it. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and just first coming becoming comfortable with telling your story in a book?
So it all came about in a fashion of somebody helping me. There was a Baptist preacher that entered my life who had went through some of the struggles. He had an alcoholism problem and decided to help men who were broken financially and spiritually. And I fit both of those categories, and sat me down in his office and said, "Look, you can tell me about your struggles, and I'm here to listen." And we shared a common bond. And he said, "Well, look, your life didn't get in this position overnight, so it's not going to change overnight. But if you decide to read this book," and he slid a book in front of me, and it was the
Mm-hmm.
Holy Bible. And I knew a little something about that growing
Yeah.
up in the church, and decided to get into it really heavily. And as they say, the rest is history. And then that also helped me with my writing because I seeked, really sought out to help people. And despite what people say, Black people do read. And I wanted, to carry that message on, that if people were to decide to read what I wrote, uh, they would find it helpful some kind of way, whether it's some sort of quotation uh, from a person famous or not so famous, or a story that's in this book that talks about people who may have been in gangs or come from a broken home, or uh, just a variety of things. I'll let you ask the questions. I don't get too far ahead of you talking
No,
about the
you're
book.
fine. Yeah,
But
you're fine. You're absolutely fine. Oh, I've got plenty of questions, so we won't run out. Don't worry.
okay, cool. And I just wanted, the bottom line for me, it was therapeutic as well, uh,
Yeah.
because I didn't know how much pain I still had and was harboring aside from some of the things I went through. And once, I started writing, I cried a little bit, and I laughed a little bit. And uh, I said, well, I hope the audience does the same thing, goes through the same emotions, uh,
Hmm.
because it's something in there that somebody's going to be able to relate to one way or the other.
Okay. Yes. 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 Definitely. I understand that. So, and initially, when you decided to write this book, this is something that I think all people can relate to when it comes to creating projects for others that actually heal themselves. That heal yourself through the process. Also, just especially because you kind of focus on homelessness and some of those adversities, that's usually a time period where, God will sit you down. So reading is something that I think a lot of those people would have access to at that time, to be able to really have their full attention and hone into those messages. Could you tell us a little bit about what your planning process was like when writing your book? Did you like work out an outline, or did you kind of just freestyle write and just go? What was that planning process like?
So for me, it's just about putting thoughts on paper. And before I forget, because once you reach a certain age, your memory gonna start going. So it didn't matter where I was at. If I thought about something to put in a book, I wrote it down, whether it was a receipt, a piece of paper, a couple times I even wrote on my own hand, just so I wouldn't forget. And when I get home, I'll make the adjustments, put it on paper, and then I try to write things in chronological order if I can, from start to finish. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way because you have to double back for whatever reason. And that's kind of my process. I'll step away from it if I get writer's block. I don't get too uh, caught up in I got to get finished by a certain time. Although that's nice, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just sometimes life happens,
Yeah.
and that's another reason why I'll step away to recharge my batteries. That's very important, especially if you're a person who uh, just takes some time out and meditate. And that's key as well. I would encourage people to take time out, especially during these days and times, and meditate. And those kind of the things that help me write from beginning to finish.
Yes, I love it. Show us that cover again so we can see. That's awesome. Surviving the storm. The poor will
Bear fruit in
bear
America.
fruit in America. Awesome. I love the cover. I love the graphic art that you had there. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with your concept for your cover. Did you work with an outsourced team for that, or was that kind of your vision?
Yes, so the cover was my vision, and I actually worked with a good friend of mine who happens to be the son of my neighbor, who's a graphic designer and has done quite a few uh, designs over the years. His name is Brian Hargrove of Navia Media. I just want to send him a shout out. And we put that together probably in a couple months or so. Uh, and I don't know if you paid attention, but there's certain colors in there that stand out. Red represents the blood of Jesus, and then on the back cover you have a heart and an apple, so that represents the fruit. So it took us a while to kind of get the meaning of where I was going with this, but he was willing to listen and he was very patient. And that's another thing. When you're writing, you have to be patient. I would encourage people who are seeking to do this to be patient. Don't beat yourself up uh, because it's not about you, it's about the people who you want to impact. So that's kind of how we came about there too. I try to work.
Hey guys, I think we may have lost Kelvin. Oh, he's back. Great,
Oh,
great, great. We lost you for a quick second.
okay. So I'll recap briefly. I
Oh,
said,
I think we got it. You just went out just a quick second, but
oh,
I think
okay,
we did. I think we did get it.
okay.
Yeah, and I think that's that's so smart. Just to remember to be patient, because a lot of times when we're working on these projects, we want to finish and we're excited about it. And also, we know our story and we know the inner workings of what we're trying to put out. So a lot of times, if we rush, we will have gaps, and things that need to be clarified more, because we're relying on our own understanding, and not thoroughly taking our time and considering that the reader is coming from zero knowledge. So based on what you're presenting, we're assuming. So
That's right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was a great tip. I think that was very valuable to share. And I think it's great too to outsource while you're planning writing, and not having to do everything yourself. If you need to work with a graphic designer, or you need to work, with an editor, etc., I think that's okay. So And how did you do with editing? What was your editing process like for this book?
The editing process was crazy. Anybody who's been through this knows that it can get pretty frustrating if you have a date in mind to be done. I had that date, and of course, it didn't work out that way because you want your project to be, if there's such a thing as being perfect, you definitely want it to be acceptable and no and error free, of course.
Yes,
And
yes.
that was important. So the editor, Hareen Freeman, by the way, is her name, uh, took about 3 months. We went back and forth. Why you want this in here? Well, I want this in here because, well, I think you need to take away from this.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't want to take away from this because I'm trying to get a certain point across.
Yeah.
Uh, when I want the reader to feel it in their soul. I want the reader to feel my writing and what I'm saying deep down in their soul. And, you can't take away from the creativity. I understand that, it should flow a certain way. I get that,
Mm-hmm.
but I want it to flow a certain way at the end of the day.
As well, yeah, yeah. And I'm, that's a great topic to mention as well, because there does have to be a standard balance established, between the editor and the author, because there does have to be that chemistry, and you do have to find that happy medium, where your authentic voice is not being lost, but also that you are taking in consideration an outside perspective, because ultimately that's who your book is for. So yeah, it's definitely a space to navigate. So it's great that you did find chemistry there, although it took some time. But that's okay. That's okay too. The product has proved to be worth it. So
That's right.
that is the key right there.
That's right.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your story, the story itself, and how did you formulate the message that you wanted to send, and what essentially is that message without spoiling?
So the message is never to give up on people. People have had second, third, fourth, and some even fifth chances. Don't see a person for what they are now. See them for what they can be later on. And that is including myself. The people who have wrote me off, and God don't give up on nobody as long as you reach out. And when I reached out, as they say, you hit rock bottom, and it's been up ever since that time. Clean and sober for 20 years. In a year's time, I went from being in a men's outreach center to finding full-time employment to being married. And I'm still married to the same woman today. And it'll be 19 years this year. So that's my
That's a
message.
beautiful thing, and congratulations on that marriage. Marriage by itself,
Absolutely.
even without, traumas, past traumas or turmoils or things like that, is already a journey and already a challenge. It's a beautiful challenge, but it's a challenge nevertheless. So that's a great accomplishment, and just testimony to go with your story as well. Tell us a little bit about um, you know I guess some of your PowerPoints of your story, that you kind of wanted to shed light on, especially being born in Philadelphia. I'm definitely a Philadelphia native, so I understand. I understand, that narrative, and also realize that how many statistics you're, beating with your story, just coming from that urban community in and of itself. So tell us a little bit about some of your power points in your stories that we can look forward to in this book.
Well, thanks, and I appreciate that question. So, part of what I want to get across is not so much uh, the beginning of what I highlighted, and I did talk a little bit about myself, but what I wanted to do was highlight people that I knew, some of them professionally, some of them personally, some of them both, who I know had really went through hard times and struggles, uh, whether that was here in DC or San Francisco or Seattle. And there's people featured from all across the country. And what they went through, and how they were written off in society, and how people look at you when you're down on your luck. And uh, there's plenty of people who have been through that. And I wanted to highlight that the struggles, from struggle to redemption would be one, from redemption to happiness, from happiness to joy, from joy to peace. And it's nothing like peace. I know a lot of people who are successful, uh, whether that's financially or professionally or both, and they're unhappy, you know. But it's nothing like peace. And I'm at a space now in my life where I have peace, and the stories in this book, uh, with the people I interviewed, they have peace as well. And some of them, it took a short period of time to get to that. Some of them, it took quite a while to get to that. Uh, and you said it earlier about journey. It's all about the journey. Some people journey is kind of quick to where they want to get to a place that they desire, and some of it is a marathon. Life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. I just want to reemphasize
Yes.
that, uh,
Yes, for
because
sure. Yes.
that's very important. And while most of my childhood was spent here in DC, every summer I would go back to Philly because I still have family there. And that helped mold me as well. Because the two cities I spent the most time in are very different. Uh, One's kind of hardcore and gritty. That would be Philly, and DC is more political.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't make it here in DC if you don't know how to play the game. So, and I mean, that's
Yeah.
anywhere, but especially here.
Yeah.
Everything here is political. Um, the job, most of the jobs that I have is through somebody I know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that comes with networking. You know,
Mm-hmm.
networking is very important. I
Yeah.
tell anybody that, the old saying in our community is, it's not what you know, but who you know. And that's very true. You realize that as you get older. Uh, and in this book too, I talk about relationships, the power of the relationship, the power of letting yourself become vulnerable to get to a place where you dream of being.
Yes, I love that. And your concept overall is so needed right now, especially, right now, this is the time of the cancel culture. If you haven't seen or noticed online and social media, communities and society in general is just so quick to cancel people today, just for whatever they feel as though they've done that is unacceptable. So I really think that the concept of your book is very much needed, and the fact that you've interviewed other people and included their stories is really powerful, because it comes from multiple angles, I'm sure, to push the same message, and that's another strategy that's very effective, especially through literature. So I commend you, and our time is unfortunately winding, but I do have another question I want to ask. If you could leave our viewers with some advice and just a message for drafting stories, especially nonfiction stories, and just attaching it to a purpose. What would you say to them when they are afraid to start, or if they've already started but they're thinking about giving up?
If you haven't start somewhere. Doesn't matter where. Just start and see the finished product before you get there. I was able to see the product, the book, from the book cover to the people I wanted to interview,
Mhm.
uh, before it actually happened. You got to have vision. For, as the word says, people perish for the lack of vision. You got to have vision. Quitting is not an option, period.
Mhm.
Because if you quit, then you've just told yourself, I can't do it.
Yes.
And the only place can't comes in the dictionary is after can.
Mhm.
Take away the T off of can't. And
Mm-hmm.
as our first Black president said, yes, we can.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And a lot of times it's a mental thing. You just have to push yourself and stay connected to positive resources that push you as well. I'm sure, it helps to have a support system behind you when you're working on these projects and things like that. So that's always encouraged as well. Where can we find your books right now? How can we order them? And also tell us just a little bit about your first book. Where you mentioned about your quotes.
Sure. So the first book is titled "The Storm Is Over for Now: Quotes for and Achievements for Success." That's no longer in rotation, but I wrote that some 12 years ago,
Oh, wow. Okay.
back in 2009, and I'm actually going to put that back in a rotation. It's 52 quotes, one quote uh, per week for the whole year, and
Mm-hmm.
then one quote for the whole year. So it's 53 quotes. Some of them are by famous people, some are not so famous, and it talks about life stuff. For example, Dr. King says, uh, he talks about taking a chance when you can't see the whole staircase. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to jack the quote up, but
Right, right. I know which
uh,
quote you're
and then
referring
there's a
to.
story behind that where I talk about the staircase, actually taking a chance to climb the staircase, even when you're not sure if the steps are going to hold or it's going to fall. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it's going to fall when you walk in the steps, but you take the risk anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing we got to do in life. We got to take the risk anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Life is a series of risks.
Yeah,
And sometimes they're
that's
going to
so
work in your
true.
favor, and sometimes they're not. And if they don't, that's okay. Just keep it moving. But quitting is not an option. And,
Yes.
and for this book, you can find it on our website, www.saveusnowdc.org.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I think that's great. And guys, if you see at the bottom, we'll have his information going through to connect with him as well as down in the captions. Um, Before you go, could you leave us with an encouraging word for, I guess, anyone who is dealing with homelessness? Just because you've had direct experience with that, um, what would you say to someone who is battling homelessness right now, and just looking for an encouraging word?
Oh, that's real simple. Believe in yourself when no one else does, regardless of how bad people treat you, how bad people talk to you, how bad or disgusting looks you may get from people. You got to dig down deep inside your heart and inside your mind and inside your soul that I can be who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bottom line. You got to see yourself out of homelessness before you get there. I know
Yeah.
somebody right now who's currently homeless, is a good friend of mine. Uh, COVID had three businesses, lost them
Wow.
all, got kicked out when a relative died, and ended up homeless. And now 9 months later, he's bought a car and about to get his own place.
Nice.
And
That's
I
amazing.
and I just kept encouraging him, hey, you're gonna get through this. You cannot quit and see yourself through this before you get there. And he's there.
Awesome. That is amazing. And thank you so much, Kelvin, for your passion in this area and just, your willingness to use your story and use your passions and your time, to deliver and show up in these areas. I know that the viewers can appreciate it, and obviously connect with your book. I can expect very much power to come through that, through all of the stories. And we appreciate you again for coming on to AAMBC, The Ink Conversations with Authors. And guys, you can learn more about Kelvin at www.saveusnowdc.org.
And I appreciate your time today. It's been great being with you all, and I hope your audience got something out of this. I hope they were encouraged. I
Likewise.
hope they won't quit on somebody who they may thought about giving up on, uh, and have a change of heart.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much, Kelvin. We appreciate you,
You're
and we
welcome.
hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You do the
And
same.
thanks again to our viewers for
God
tuning in
bless.
to another conversation. You as well.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
I told a story, not with the stroke of a pen, but with the depth of my soul. Not by the light of the night, but with the window of my eyes. You smiled, and we touched. In our impatience, we rushed to each other's arms, despite the fear and the alarms. I let you past the pain, past the shadows, between our sweet and secret mutters. You wrote all over my body, passing from chapter to chapter, filled with cooling and warming rapture. We started at the end, but how did we begin?
So Sugar Hill is my 17th book. 17. It's a lot. And I never really know where the titles of my stories come from. So when I began to write Sugar Hill, again, I didn't know who I was going to write about. Didn't know the characters. I didn't know the plot. But I knew it was going to be about love. And when I began to write about Danielle and began to know her, I began to identify her past. And she was called Sugar when she was younger. And Sugar Hill is her name, and I wanted the story itself to be centered around her. So it's a little play on words. It isn't a thing, it's a person. And I think that when you think about Sugar Hill, it's going to give you that Love Jones 90s type of poetic vibe. So I always have a message in my books, unknowingly, and it's always about redemption. My characters are trying to redeem themselves when it comes to love or when it comes to loving somebody. And when you read the book Sugar Hill, I want you to identify what Danielle is technically doing wrong. Because again, when you're meeting new people and when you're learning new people and you're trying to allow them into your space, it takes a certain type of comfort and trust for that to happen. And so I want people to identify their comfort zones, identify why they're not vulnerable, identify how they can be vulnerable, and then also be a little bit more risky when it comes to getting to know somebody new. Get out of your head, because I promise you it's probably all in your head, and actually talk to the person, communicate with the person, spend time with the person. And I promise you almost all those thoughts, at least half of those thoughts, would just fade away when you just allow yourself just to be in that space with that person. So with Sugar Hill, I hope that you guys get an idea of another way to love, another way to communicate.